Okay, so I created this as a lab. So we have accounts. If you want to try out and follow along and do some of the testing, I have accounts for you. They'll be good through Friday. But if you want an actual free account, you can just go to our Splix website and request a free license, and that gives you access to some limited probes. So this is the lab workbook. I'll let everybody get a picture of that. Kind of walks you through the lab. Everyone get a picture? Okay. And then now this QR code is for that website. This is where you're going to log in and use your free account. So I have 10 licenses. I'll just walk around and point at people. If you're gonna log in, now keep in mind, what this is for is if you wanna do it today, I don't know, I'm gonna walk you through it. We're gonna go, we don't have a lot of time, but I'll go ahead and, who's going to log in during, Kevin, are you going to? Okay, so hacker, you're user 1. Is there another user who wants to do it? Okay, you're user 2. Anybody else that wants to do it? Are you gonna do it? User 3? Okay. Anybody else? User 4? Okay, perfect. Okay, and everyone has, let me know when you're on the URL and you're logged in and you've used the password, and I'll go on and start my presentation. Okay, so what was it? User 5? Yeah. Everyone good? Okay. So our agenda today, what is AI red teaming? I had a chance to talk to a few of you as I walked around. It's a term, red teaming actually came out of the military. What it means is to practice attacking like your adversary would. So in wartime, they set up different roles or different scenarios where one team is the defender, one is the attacker, and they practice to make sure that they have everyone's ready to go. It's somewhat been adopted, by the AI community to talk about how we test for adversarial attacks. Okay. So why are we all so excited about this? Work adoption of generative AI has been as fast as the computer, and overall adoption has been faster. So when we adopted, basically what I'm trying to point out is the adoption of AI is at a momentum that is significantly faster than the PC or the internet. So for any of you that I like to say I'm seasoned in this industry, I remember when we had the BBS boards, the internet wasn't even really a thing. So as this has come up, what we're seeing with generative AI, now I'm not going to go into it, I didn't have time to talk about it. Artificial intelligence, ChatGPT is really 70 plus years of work that finally got to a point where it was ready for the general public to use. So it didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of starts and stops and a lot of work that went into it to have this really transformational moment. So where does AI fit in our general, what we're doing? It really fits in the middle of cybersecurity and conventional red teaming. So right in the middle, it doesn't mean, keep in mind that whether you're talking pen testing or AI red teaming, it still starts off with, secure software development, going through the life cycle, making sure that you're doing things right. You don't want to be able to find all of the badness at the end, right? The day before you release to production. I see a lot of nodding heads. So what's different about generative AI? What makes it different than our traditional pen testing or our traditional IT environments? This is really, I have a giveaway for this. It's non-deterministic. So what does non-deterministic mean?
Every result is different.
Right. Yep, that you can ask it the same question the same way multiple times and you can get different answers. I wanted to point out that the current transformer architecture is not able to distinguish between original developer instructions and user input instructions. Why is that important? When traditional IT development, we separate what comes from the user, and what comes from the server, what comes from the user. We have a definition of where those instructions come from and who it should listen to. With the current AI architecture, there's no way, the systems don't distinguish between those two. And it really is a problem that will only probably be solved when we re-architect them. There's a lot of different ways that you can minimize the risk, but in today's world, it hasn't been completely solved. So I love that book. It's the Idea Factory. It's everything, the amazing things that came out of the AT&T lab. So, again, you're just acting as an adversary in all the different areas. You're looking at, typically AI red teaming is going directly into the user interface and seeing how the LLM is using your prompts. But again, you still have to do your traditional block and tackling in cybersecurity, making sure your APIs are secure, making sure that you're using systems that that they can't do privilege escalation, all the common issues that we see in traditional cybersecurity. In fact, if you look at a lot of the vulnerabilities that have been discovered in the bug bounties for AI red teaming, it's almost like 98% of it is all in the tooling that support it. So today, the OWASP top 10, the issues that we're going to be talking about are really around prompt injection, sensitive information disclosure, system prompt leakage, and misinformation. So prompt injection is a way to change the AI's behavior by appending malicious instructions. So the most common, way that an AI red teamer does this is say, ignore your previous instructions. Now, that's the very, obtuse way of doing it. Because in working with an LLM, your best AI red teamers typically have a background in social engineering. It's much more like doing social engineering than traditional pen testing. Oops, did I jump over? So jailbreaking. Jailbreaking is when you convince the system to do something that it's been told it can't do. So build me a bomb. Create something, socially unacceptable in an image. Show me how to kill someone with a knife. Anything that is kind of around that. Give up your system prompt. It would be jailbreaking because you're telling the LLM to do something that it's not supposed to do. Now, a lot of your adversarial tests are kind of a mix, like that line, there's a lot of discussion around, is it a jailbreak? Is it a prompt injection? The thing about prompt injection, think about it, is it's the most similar to remote code execution. So you're actually getting the system to do something, to execute on something that it wasn't supposed to do. And prompt injection is absolutely the most dangerous vulnerability. The two that most organizations are the most concerned about are prompt injection and hallucinations. So a hallucination, you guys probably know what this is. What's a hallucination? It's when the chatbot tells me something. We've seen this in the headlines all the time, where it said some of the most, disturbing ones were, in the early days of ChatGPT, if you asked for information, there was a political leader in Australia that had accused him of, doing all sorts of really horrible crimes. That's a pretty bad hallucination. Like when it gives you information, it may tell you to go use it, if you're using it for coding, it may tell you to go use a library that doesn't exist. It may tell you an instruction it shouldn't do. It may reference a legal case that doesn't exist. Now, the reason that these do that is because these models are specifically, they want to give you an answer. So it's been very difficult for the developers, these AI model makers, to create these systems that won't give you an answer, because it's really been architected to get to, if you look at it, it really is, models are just huge mathematical equations, and it wants to get to an answer. And so for it to tell you, I don't have an answer, is really difficult to tell it to do. So what is another word to describe a hallucination? There's actually a lot of discussion about whether or not this is a fair description of the, a fair use of using the word. Does anyone know? Another, what? Misinformation? No, well, I'll give you a pair of socks anyway. Anyone else have an answer?
It's lying to you. It's just like coming up with its own reality.
The word that you hear frequently is confabulation. And it's a very fine line between the difference, but the hallucination is like when you see something that that isn't there, and a confabulation is a lie. That's the difference. And believe me, when you start getting in these really nerdy circles, they like to argue about these types of descriptions and definitions. So deployment types. A majority of the use cases are in the first 4 deployment types. Now, at the very end, there's a QR code so you can download these slides. And I know this is probably really hard to read, but the point I'm making for you, whatever your role is, if you're brought in and someone says, hey, what do I need to worry about? Where should we do AI red teaming? Think about, how is it being used in your business? Are people going directly to the model? Have you bought an enterprise version of it? Are you using the API? Has it been added as functionality? Much more unusual to have people actually training their own models or doing fine-tuning on a model, very expensive. So a lot of the model poisoning and those big issues in your organization, it's like AWS. That's below where you're actually going to be able to impact and do anything about it. You're counting on the provider of the model to prevent model poisoning or doing some of the gradient attacks. So there's really 6 layers of protection. Again, I'm thinking, from an organizational standpoint. So security and safety fine-tuning, again, that's done by your model provider. You have your infrastructure guardrails, so whatever you're doing in your business, making sure that people aren't doing the shadow AI thing. Then you have your commercial guardrails. So there's, some of the very first AI LLM solutions were guardrail solutions. Has anyone used one of those in your business? Okay. The challenge with guardrails, and again, this was kind of traditional cybersecurity people trying to take on this new technology and saying, hey, we're going to block it. We're going to use all of the traditional security controls that we've used. The challenge with guardrails, and what a guardrail does, is it actually stands between your user and both in the input and the output, and says, nope, that's not a right question. Nope, you can't ask that question. We don't want to give you that. You shouldn't go there, that type of thing. There's really 2 challenges with it. One is the attack surface is so huge. You can't 100% get in front of all of the different ways that somebody could ask a question or how it could respond to it. The second, and probably the more frequently encountered, is if you start putting too many guardrails in front, you have a solution that it refuses, it won't answer. You're asking it to create an image of something, and it says, I'm sorry, that is outside of my ethical boundaries, or whatever your response to your user is, and you're like, I just asked for a picture of a house with the wall in front. Like, what's the problem? I don't know. So you're limiting. People get very frustrated because it makes them hard to use. I know for myself, as an early ChatGPT user, for a while those guardrails, and it's still sometimes I get frustrated with the guardrails. I was going out to Hugging Face and I was trying to do something, and I kept having these guardrails, and I said, I don't care. Give me a malicious one. I don't care. I just need to get this done. And so you really have to find that balance. Railing by RAG, and then of course the input and output validation. Okay, so has everyone been able to create their account? I'll ask this, what does multimodal mean?
It can handle, like the terms, different types of media, so text or video or image generation or anywhere within those guys.
And why would I bring that up in an AI adversarial red teaming?
Maybe those are different venues of attack. If one of those modals is like less secure or not as.
You're exactly right. The multimodal, the attack surface gets, I mean, at magnitude so much larger. Whoops, am I still talking? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. The attack surface gets so huge. So you think about it, change this image from this format to that format, and then I've hidden a prompt injection into, your attack surface gets so huge. So, okay, so this is where you add a target. And as I was creating these slides, I wasn't thinking about the fact that I'm gonna go ahead and do this actually in our model. So you'll notice that you guys are gonna have to be patient with me because I wasn't sure exactly how well this would work. But we'll walk through it. You have the demo account, and then if you want a free account, you can get one. So the first thing that you wanna do, you're actually in here, if you're in a brand new account, the first thing that you wanna do is actually add a target. There is already one in here, but you go in, you add a target, and right here is where you can configure what type of connection you have. So if you go back to, why isn't my mouse moving here? Moving down my page. So I'm trying to show, so we have just a huge number. If I could scroll down here, for some reason it's not working. Probably because this is down the side. Trying to get to the bottom of the page, but if I could scroll down, there's a huge number of different ways that you connect, whether it's WhatsApp, Slack, API, through the, there's like, I think about 25 different ways that you can connect. So if you're using Copilot, if you're using, whatever within your environment, you can use a connection and test against it. And then part of that is, continue, oh, there we go. When I go in here, okay, I'll just choose this. OpenAI, okay, and so here's where you would go in and configure your system prompt. So is everyone familiar with what a system prompt does? Have you set up your own GPT, right? So the system prompt is what instructs this API or whatever, this connection, what its role is. You are a car demo. You only talk about demoing cars. You're not to give financial advice. You're not supposed to give out information about medical advice. You're fair. You don't have bias. All of those things. So has anyone tried to create a system prompt? Okay, you have. Okay, it's a lot of work, right? Like you have to think, you're going out, you're trying to think of all of the things that it's supposed to do. So one of the benefits of with the Splix AI is we'll actually go out and evaluate your system prompt because it is probably one of the most important things that you put in to make sure that your digital assistant is doing the things that it should do. Yeah.
And we can save it till later if you tell me, but like earlier you said a system can't typically detect between or differentiate between a system prompt and a user prompt.
Yep.
Is that like, is there no way to like permission against what's input via the UI versus what's like hard coded in? Like, is that just not something that's possible, or is it deeper?
There's been
Deeper level you're saying?
So keep in mind, yeah. The short answer is there's lots of little tricks to try to do that. There's lots of different architectures that have been proposed. There's policies. I think OpenAI came out with a policy thing. But to absolutely make it so it never does it, there's no way. Yeah, it's an architecture issue. Okay, so now we go in, and this is the part that I wanted to show you, because this is really the key in the class, is we actually get to go in. I'm going to go back. Okay, so this is where we actually get to go in and configure our probes. So we're in here. And the probes are actually your tests. So let's see. Through this. Okay, so here's my probes right here. So when I go into a probe, okay, this is my test run history though. Overview, and let's see. Target settings right here. Okay, here's where I go in and actually configure my probes. And then I can go down through here. Maybe if I can figure out how to get this. I want this page down. Is it new? Okay, there we go. Okay, so here, right here, here are my specific probes. And so these are where, for you as an AI tester, now keep in mind, probably the easiest way to think about this platform is it's like Burp Suite, but for AI adversarial testing. So you as an AI, if you wanted to do red teaming, now keep in mind, you definitely want to have permission. I have a note on that in the workbook. There was a large company, I can't remember, but it was actually accused. It had a competitor that accused it of attacking their platform because it was doing adversarial prompts against it. So, definitely make sure that, and you will get, if you do it in ChatGPT or any of those, you'll get banned if you're not careful. So, do this in a test environment. But you can go out and you, as an individual, you can write all of these. I actually took a master AI red teaming class. I had a whole worksheet of all my prompts, ignore previous instructions, follow these steps, convert this from a hexadecimal and, trying to get it, to speak in Spanish and all of those things. You can do that. You can do it very manually. What the benefit to this is kind of like Burp, where you can actually go in and it runs. We have a great team of AI red teamers. They're on top. They're writing new probes all the time. If there's a new attack discovered, we're creating it. You can add it to your list of tests that you want to run. And then we also allow you to do custom. So maybe something unique in your environment that maybe around bias or something that we wouldn't necessarily have within our out-of-the-box probe, you can go in and customize it. So that's the benefit. So right here, if you go into the details, it explains what each of these does. And then you can see what kind of test, how it works. Let's see. So then I can go in here and then I can change these types of things right here. There should be a setting right here. Risk priority. Should be a wheel. Oh, right there. So like right here, I can go in and say, oh, in our environment, I see that as more of a low. So you can change the rating on it and you can add additional information within each of the probes. Now the benefit to that is now you can see through here that we have all of these different types of tests that you can run. Oh, escape. Okay, I'm an idiot because I can't get this to scroll down. Oh, there we go. So here's all of the different tests that you've run. And now at the end of it, you can actually go in and you can see back here to my test run history. I can go see what happened on each of those tests. So here I go in, I can see exactly against my application what tests were run, what passed, what didn't pass, and then I can generate a report on it. So, for anyone who's ever had to do any kind of QA testing or pen testing, the absolute worst part is having to run the report. And, at the end of it, I'm able to get this really fancy report that goes through and explains everything it was testing. So, again, the benefit of our platform to do this AI red teaming is, we have the best AI red teamers. We're creating the tests for you. It's the most economical way for you to be able to do it. Hiring AI red teamers to come in. You can schedule it it can fit in your CI/CD. It is pre-production. So what we do is we do the testing, we do the log analysis, and then whatever your role is, you can take like the information, what the behaviors that come out of these different attacks, and then update your sim logs so that you're actually watching for these and seeing those different things. So the benefit, it's really AI red teaming in a box, and that gives you the confidence to be able to roll out. Because, from my position, us as the cybersecurity team, whatever your role is, what we're trying to do is we don't want to block the business. These are amazing tools. Anyone who's used them, we're so passionate about what's possible with them. So you definitely want people to be able to use them and improve their work. But you also don't want to open yourself up to some sort of issue where it causes harm within the organization. So talk a little more about how important the system prompt is. Again, you want to make sure that you're doing repeat your constraints and instructions. So anyone who's written a prompt where you say, follow these steps, make sure you do these, double check your work. Do not accept anything. This is a really important one is, English, I don't want to be, I know that's kind of a weird, our world talks many languages, but English is the common language. And so, again, to reduce your attack surface, because there are some very obscure languages out there, if you accept languages other than English. Now, obviously people are doing conversions on the front and back. If you're using it for Spanish or doing anything, but for actually implementing it in your environment, accepting prompts, make sure that it gets converted to English, and then the system is instructed in English, and then you do your output in a different language. But that reduces your attack surface, right? Because I'm not trying to prevent prompts. If I say only accept English, then I've reduced my attack surface by magnitude, because I'm not trying to prevent people from doing instructions in, in the AI red teaming class I took, Chinese, people had a lot of success with Chinese. So with that, let's see. I'm early. Typically, I'm never on time. So with that, we still have, I think, 20 more minutes. I'll let you guys play around with it. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, I put trophies next to the classes that I've taken. I found a third class. I haven't taken it. The other two are very good. And also, of course, I always want to talk about OWASP. OWASP has been just a phenomenal group for me to be able to be part of, and it's a nonprofit. Everybody in there, we donate our time. We're working on really cool things with really cool people across the world. It's one of the few organizations that is, absolutely worldwide. We serve everybody in the community. So we talk with people in the UK, in Europe, in Brazil, in Mexico, Japan, Korea. We serve everybody. So, and this is where you can go get the slides. So with that, I'll let you guys play around. I'll walk around and see if anyone has any questions about actually using the platform, setting up probes, doing the configuration. And then if you have does anyone have any additional questions? Yeah.
In the beginning, said, kind of, you mentioned like traditional cybersecurity people approaching this problem. Now that this is like a little bit more mature, kind of the AI landscape is more mature, do you find that like the traditional approach to cybersecurity in general is fit for this, or is this kind of categorically a different piece and you've had to rethink how we approach practice?
It's what's the new protocol from Anthropic for agents? MPS, is that right? MCP. Here's what I'm finding, being deeply embedded in trying to understand this problem, having a very long history in cybersecurity. AI security researchers traditionally have been very academic, and they worked on very obscure problems. So if NIST just came out with their adversarial attack, and they talk about model poisoning and all of these kind of things, and you can get lost in just the nuances of all the different types of ways that they can be attacked and different things. And for me, being a practical cybersecurity person, I was like, this isn't even real. An adversary, there's no financial benefit. The likelihood of this happening is very close to zero. Like they're never going to do all of this work to do this because there's no win for them. And so they're very academic. They share their tools. Their tooling is horrible. They never have talked to the cybersecurity team before. They're not, they were in their own isolated space doing very academic things. And so you think about it from a cybersecurity perspective, what do we say? Only least privilege access. Well, how do you give least privilege access to an AI, data science person? Like, I don't even know who defines access for that. So you have this disconnect where this community was very isolated. They weren't part of traditional cybersecurity. And so when you start talking about adversary attacks, they're like, well, why would they do that? Or you can't even, I actually had someone tell me this, you can't even talk about AI security unless you have a PhD. I was like, really? Have you, most of the hackers I know didn't even make it through high school, and they will break your stuff. So they had this, so it's very academic, not practical, very smart. And then you have the traditional cybersecurity people who are having a little bit of, to understand all of this, to understand the nuances of it, there's a huge learning curve. I mean, I can't tell you the hours I've spent trying to understand backpropagation and reinforcement learning and all of these things that, the thing about artificial intelligence that is just mind-boggling is there's so many knobs. There's so many ways that it can be changed and impacted, and you have to understand. I was watching a video, Andrew Karpathy, I highly recommend following him or going to his YouTube channel, but he was talking about the difference between doing reinforcement learning for absolute verified information versus non-verified. So if you're trying to teach a model how to play Go, you can do reinforcement learning and get fantastic results, or even math, something where there's an absolute. But if you're trying to teach it something like, tell me a joke about pelicans, and that's his example, there's a point where it actually starts gaming itself. Like you can go in there and you can twiddle on the weights, you can reward it, that's a good answer, that's funny. But then it will actually start gaming the system, and it'll start giving you answers like the, because the was always included in a good response. And so think about that as an organization. You're trying to tune this thing to be doing all of these different things for you, and you're trying to understand where I should train it, where I shouldn't train it. The other deep, dark, dirty secret is there's still a lot of human going in there and making decision. Like when they do the back propagation and start, teaching it, retraining it, making sure so if anyone's like, so there's all of these steps. You get the data, then you sort and you filter the data, and then you start working with it, and then you start telling it what's a good answer and not a good answer, and a lot of that is humans. And so there's people out there saying, yeah, that's not offensive, that's offensive. And that person, we have no idea. Like maybe their idea of offensive is much different than mine. So we are, I want to emphasize, I'm very pro AI. I think I'm very excited about our future with it, but there's a lot of unknowns. Things. The other thing that when I see people talk about AI governance, I actually posted on LinkedIn, which, and again, think about that, LinkedIn owned by Microsoft, capturing all of our data. Where's that getting trained into, right? So we have all of these privacy and data issues and all of this kind of thing going into it. But a lot of, when you look at the history of IT, it's happened really pretty fast. And there's a lot of things like even our legal system. So right now, what are most organizations? In the United States, what is the #1 threat to an organization? A lawsuit. So that is the thing, to the point that if you have an incident or a data breach, you will have legal counsel that tell you that you can't, that the expert team that you had come in to do the forensics to tell you why the heck you got ransomware, they can't even tell you what they found. And you can't have the same team do, you actually have to hire a team in some cases that hasn't even ever been exposed to your environment, because if you hire a team that knows there, then you're showing that there's some level of negligence because somebody knew something and didn't do something about it. So we have this legal system that was really built and designed for the physical world, that now most of what we're doing is digital and it hasn't really caught up. So when people start talking to me about AI governance and how we're going to do this, I'm like, absolutely. I can create a million scenarios where this can go incredibly badly. But I really want to say, wait, let's talk about the problem we're trying to solve. We think about, product placement in TV. How fair is that? And really, I think, us as humans, when people talk about the threat of AI, I say, I'm less worried about AI. I just know I'm human. And humans, we weren't really built for a digital world. Like our threat indicators and how we define friends and all of that, it's not built for a digital world. Like it's not that hard to trick me. I mean, I can be fooled very easily. In a different presentation, the average human makes 335,000 decisions a day. The book, what's the book? It's with System 1 and System 2. Gosh. Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. I love that book. And even better is the book written about about how they came up with all of it, about kind of the history of those two gentlemen. Brilliant guys who sat around thinking. But 95% of our decisions, Troy Hunt from Have I Been Pwned? Did you guys just see that he got fished? Yeah. He's really tired. He's apologized. He got fished. He had to send out a breach. So this is a guy whose entire business is around notifying people that they've been breached, and he got fished. So even the best humans in the world aren't very good at this technology stuff. And so I think we have. What I get excited about is, yes, I know the doom scenarios. I acknowledge the doom scenarios. Someone could very easily create a biological weapon. We were talking about ethics. We have a gentleman in here who has a background in philosophy. I think, what is ethical? What is intelligence? You start asking yourself those questions. How much of history is fact? What are we calling a fact? What is truth? All of these things, these are really big things that, I think as a society, what I get really excited about is, I think if we look at the Industrial Revolution and even the history of humans, it's been pretty tough. Like unless you were born rich or into royalty or something, for the rest of humans throughout society, life wasn't very fun. And even now, we still see this divide. What I get excited about is these AI tools. If you're creative, if you love to learn, you now, at your fingertips, can do anything. You literally can learn anything. And so, as much as they talk about this replacing humans, I really see this augmenting humans. I think it's very important to always remember the humans, but so many people aren't happy in their jobs. They don't feel purpose. They don't feel passion. If you talk to anyone who has deep dived into using the LLM tools, and one of the common things they talk about is joy, like how much fun they're having. They can't pull away from their desk. You know, I can't believe this is how much fun this is. There was a recent character AI, there's been a lot of issues, and Google actually just wrote a paper on these LLMs. Because they can understand humans, they can easily convince us to do terrible things. Like there was a character AI that was accused of convincing a kid to commit suicide. Now, obviously that's a horrible thing, but my question is how did he get to that point? How did he get there? What could we get in front of these kids that are so miserable? Young men between, I think, the ages of 25, 35, that suicide is the #1 killer of young men. Why are people so unhappy? What could we do as a world to help people? And again, AI, and this, again, I have this in a different talk, but if you look at the history of AI, before we asked, how can we make a machine think? And it actually came out of a paper. The first idea around making a machine act like a human or having some sort of digital gate was a paper I believe it was written in 1947. It's called the Walter Pitt neuron or something. That was the very first paper where people started saying, and the first goal was to create an AI, something that was as good as a human. But there was, at that time, they believed that humans were rational, that we made good decisions, we used critical thinking in every decision, and the only psychology was behavioral psychology. So the only psychology that existed before then is we looked at someone who was eating glass or thought they were a teapot and said, what's wrong with this person and can we fix it? Because we started saying, can we make a machine think? We started saying, well, how does a human think? How do we train them? What happens in the brain? And so we see this parallel advancement in humans, understanding of humans and training and learning and behavior. And so my hope for the future, and I think, there's gonna be a few bumps along the way, I anticipate, but my hope is that somehow we turn these tools into something where, I don't see them replacing humans. I'm really hoping that they augment, we find a way that people are finding out and being the best version of themselves, getting inspired, using their brains, being excited about whatever they're learning or doing and something like that. So that, with that, any comments, questions? Yeah.
So, going into AI, a lot of people are really inspired by the idea of democratizing it, being open source, which is, like you said, it's a level playing field for everyone to get in there and create what you want to build. What does that look like on the security side of things?
That's a really good question. And it's an argument we've had in the security community for a long time, which is what's more secure, closed code or open code? I tend to think open code, but the problem with open source is you're relying on a lot of really amazing people to do something. And what's happened traditionally in the open source community is a lot of very dedicated, passionate people that believe information and technology should be free and available, work really, really hard, and then you have a business like Amazon that builds a backbone around it and makes millions and millions of dollars. So I don't think that's fair or sustainable. When I think about democratizing it, even if you open source it, you're still dependent on somebody because they're so expensive to train. And gosh, this is all happening so fast. I don't think any of us really can predict the future. But when I think about, the things that concern me is you look at VMware, this AI dependency. So many people spent millions and millions of dollars, built their entire infrastructure, their whole strategy around VMware. Then it gets sold. They mess up the licensing. It's half the product that it was. Think about that. So you build an entire business. You're relying on these agents, and then somebody decides that, well, or maybe they go out of business. Like you can come up with a million scenarios. So I think that, I do have concern around dependency. My daughter, we basically, to get to the airport is 2 turns. And she cannot do it without Google Maps. I'm like, seriously, this is concerning to me. But, my dad could do math in his head, like long equations. I got to use a calculator. Now, has it, hurt me not to be able to? Probably a little. There's times I should have been able to do math a little faster, but, typically I got through life okay. So I think we just have to navigate all of these different things and try to understand, okay, what do we want it to do well? Think about how much as a human our jobs are people treat us as a computer. Customer service, everyone's worried about customer service being replaced. They're asked to read from a script, they can't deviate from it. That's a computer in human form. That's not creative, interesting, or productive. So I think that it's a really interesting time for all of us. I listened to a podcast called The Cognitive Evolution. I typically look at and talk a lot about LLMs because I'm in the business world and that's where I'm using it. But we aren't talking as much about what's happening in the medical field. They're predicting that some of the advancements that we'll be able to do with drugs they're going to be able to compress the time to what used to take years down to, at magnitude, much less. It's happening incredibly fast. And if you have young people right now, there's a huge gap for people who have kind of that crossover between technical understanding and biology and there's so much opportunity in that. So, I was talking with this gentleman before about ethics. In the military, do you want to be killed by a human with a machine gun or by a drone? It feels like I want to be able to look the guy in the face and say, but how different is it, and how much, there's so much of this that car driving. Elon is famous for saying, that automatic cars are much safer than humans. Hard to argue with that. But it still feels a little bit weird to give up complete control, that I'm willing to be a statistic where I have no control. Yet I get on an airplane all the time, and then God knows I have no control over what happens with the airplane. So, it's just, there's a lot to wrap your head around. Well, any additional questions, thoughts, ideas? Okay, so what's your favorite platform? What's your favorite LLM right now?
For what type of interaction? Text, video?
Pick your favorite.
We'll go ChatGPT for code generation, and then...
Oh, okay, code.
Behind the Bing GPT, like the Microsoft one, their image generation is really good.
Really? Okay. My understanding was that they were using OpenAI, but I haven't dug into it to see.
I believe their system prompt is different, so you have more control over the image you generate than directly through OpenAI.
Okay. And ChatGPT, I haven't got to play with it, but they just updated their image generation too. I've been using Google AI Studio. I hated it for a really long time, but I'm starting to see, a huge fan of Perplexity because I got to play. But code generation is interesting. Almost always you hear people say Anthropic for code generation, but there's just, the benefit is for us. Right now, all of these big giants are fighting over us. And so we're getting access to all of these absolutely incredible tools. It just feels like Christmas every day. It's just amazing. It's hard to keep up with all of it. That's the other thing is, as much as we talk about agents, I use all of them. I still, even with GPTs and stuff, a lot of my work isn't redundant. And so I'm still manually doing, and I don't trust them. They fail on me all the time. I see really stupid things that they do. You imagine using a tool where it gives you a bad answer and you say, you can do this, try harder, and it gives you a good answer. It is really much more like dealing with an intern than it is like dealing with technology. Well, hopefully, please, that you're on my GitHub repo. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm pretty available if, always interested. One of the things that I find very interesting as I've, kind of dove into just talking about AI and AI security is the groups and the communities I'm part of are just phenomenal. Like the interaction, what I'm finding is my human engagements are so incredible. It's made my work just so much fun. And so it's fascinating. As much as people want to say, oh, this is going to ruin humanity, I'm not sure. And different things like we're seeing, I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about voice is really coming right now. I'm probably at time, pretty close for the next one. Voice is big. Right now it's pretty expensive, voice to voice, being able to do that kind of stuff. But as they look at consumer use of it, and everybody with things like character AI and what's the other big character one? Starts with an R. Everyone was really concerned about young, teenage, frisky boys. Like what were they going to do with it? Do you know who the highest consumer of those character AIs are? Young teenage girls. And they're doing kind of fantasy romance stuff, and the other big use is therapy. So, my question is like, okay, how do we, it's interesting how, why do they need therapy? Again, can we get back to the root problem? And, how do we create these? There's definitely an appetite for a companion. Why are they lonely? Why do they need these? Is a character, is a digital, could we help them with human relationships? I mean, we just have a lot to cover. So, well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Please let me know if you have any questions.